The Sapphire render category has lots of filters that render different kinds of elements like clouds or gradients or a grid, a muzzle flash if you're trying to composite muzzle flashes into a fight scene with gunfire. We've got shapes, we've got sparkles, different kinds of textures, and each one of these different filters has specific, very specific uses. And you might find yourself needing these at one point or another. But I want to take some time to go through Grunge because this is a new filter that's in version 8, and I find myself using it more and more these days, and I'm using it across the board with different kinds of content. So I want to show this to you. So prior to Grunge, if you wanted to give a grungy texture to your image, you would have to import some sort of third-party element or picture that you would then composite on top of your footage using Slayer. But now in this version of Sapphire version 8, we have Grunge, and we can do that all within the Sapphire toolset. So I'm going to take Grunge here, and I'm going to just drop it into the filler. And you notice that just in the basic overlay, I have this very simple, grungy, rough texture. In the same way that I isolated the light leaks in the light leaks tutorial, I want to isolate my grunge here so that we can create our own grunge from scratch, and it's much easier to see whenever I turn the footage off behind it. So in your effect editor, scroll all the way down, find Combine, and change it to just grunge only. Now the grunge element is comprised of 3 different elements that function independently of one another called stamps. Just like the different elements that you saw in Light Leak, here we have stamps. So I'm going to turn off all of my stamps except for stamp number 1, and I'm going to start with just 1 stamp. So I've got a whole bunch of different stamps here to choose from, and like tile cracks, scratches, corrosion, and whenever I get in to start customizing them, open up your stamp 1 details, and the first thing you might want to do is just bump up your relative brightness so it's easier to see, and start playing around. So let's say for this one I'm going to make it sort of red, kind of maybe a blood red. We're in the swamp, we're hunting, so kind of a blood red. I like that. And let's turn down our relative density. Okay, and our relative brightness. Now, to create, my suggestion is if you want to create a more organic, natural looking overlay, I like to vary the stamp brightness considerably and vary the opacity and vary the stamp size, because that just makes it look a little bit more random, a little bit more natural. Okay, and then our relative brightness, we can turn that down a hair. All right, I like the way that looks. Now let's add another stamp. So stamp number 2, let's do plaster splotches, hairline cracks. Let's check out hairline cracks. Bump up your brightness so we can see it. That's cool. I actually like that color. Maybe we'll make it more green. Yellow. Ooh, that's nice. Okay, I like that. Solid. Bring the relative brightness down a hair. Down a hairline. Okay, let's go to like 3. Okay. Play with relative opacity, relative size, relative density. Maybe not too dense. Okay. To vary the stamp size, just make it look more natural. All right, that's good. And let's add 1 more stamp. Paint splatters is cool. I like paint splatters. Let's take a look at how that looks. Paint splatters needs to be like mucky, brownish. Okay, sort of an orange. All right, so I'm gonna turn my relative brightness here down to like say 1. Play with the opacity a bit. It's like 3. Vary the opacity, vary the size, and the relative density. All right. So now that you've got a basic idea of how you want your texture to look, now let's turn on our combine parameter back to, let's say, screen. Looks very nice. Looks pretty natural. Very cool. Now let's say we want to make that pop out of the screen a little bit more. You might want to go over to the emboss category and give it more of an embossed look. Okay. Change these settings until it pops out of the screen just the way you like it. Alrighty. So now that we've got the look down, we can go up to our master controls and we can play with the stamp density. So we can make it less dense or more dense. Stamp size and opacity. Now the next thing is we've got frame softness here. Now what is frame softness? How soft is the texture in the frame? Notice whenever I bump this way up to, like, say 1, it becomes more harsh in the middle. But whenever I take it down, it's softer in the middle. So let's say 0.2. This is important because you don't want your image to be too obscured in the middle. So you might want to turn your frame softness down. The other thing that you have is your frame radius. Notice whenever I bump this up, my on-screen controls here move. And watch, as I move it up, it's actually getting softer in the middle. So you might want to move your frame radius further up and play with the frame softness under the frame details here to soften the image so that you're not obscuring as much of it in the middle. So frame softness, let's just say 0.2. Now I'm going to bring my radius down. Looks good. Invert frame will actually invert this setting. I'll make it softer along the outside edges. Alrighty. So I like that. Finally, let's talk about shake. If I'm going to turn my combine back to grunge only so we can see this. So we can actually give our grunge a little bit of movement. And this is nice because it just kind of brings it to life. It makes it, you know, more exciting than just a static image. So I'm going to turn my shake amplitude up to 10, and you can see it's vibrating, and I wouldn't want to have that on top of my image. It's just too much. So I'm going to take my shake frequency way down. You see it defaults to 60. That's just too much. How about 6? Let's see what that looks like. It's still too much. So maybe 0.5. I found that you have to go super low. Come on, let's go more than that. Okay, so that's better. So now you see it's shaking all 3 of the stamps at once. So to create a more natural look, you might want to bump up the per stamp amplitude and frequency. So the per stamp amplitude, if I move that up a little ways, now you can see that the individual stamps are moving, but they're still vibrating too much. I don't like that, so the frequency needs to come way down. So let's say 1.5, and let's see what that does. Still too much. I want it to look natural, and I just don't want it to be vibrating because I just don't think that this won't look good. It'll be distracting as it's on top of my image. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I actually like that. So let's double check it. Let's turn screen back on. That's good. There's one more thing I think we can do to this, though, to really sell it and to make it look beautiful. And that is the blink parameter. So scroll up, and if you look, we have a blink amount and blink details. So I'm going to turn my turn this back to grunge only. And whenever I turn my blink amount up, it actually turns the stamps on and off randomly, which is really neat. It just gives it another little bit of life on your picture. Now this maybe is blinking a little bit too much, so we can reduce the blink speed to 3 maybe. Just play with these settings until you get something that you like, and turn your blink amount down a ways maybe. Oops, let's say like 0.4. A little bit more. Nice. Okay, I like it. So let's change this back. Let's try add. Let's see what add does. No. Multiply. You can create all kinds of different looks by playing with your combine modes. But now we've got a great looking grungy texture over our image. It's not just static, it's moving around, it's blinking, It's really nice looking. So you might want to save this as a preset, just in your effect editor. Either drag your filter into a bin and save it and rename it, or you can always click on Save Preset up here, bring up the preset dialog, and we'll just save this as Swamp Rock. And now I can always pull it up later on in the preset browser by clicking on Load Preset.